It is episode number 6 of You Matter IL. You Matter World, everybody. You Matter. I am Mo of 97.7 QLZ. And of course, Angela Cummings of the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. How are you today?
I am very good. Thank you so much.
You and I were talking off the air while waiting for our guest who hopefully will be able to connect with us here momentarily. But we planned this originally as a 6-part series. With the idea that hopefully this is well received enough and the information is true and correct and hopefully help people enough that we will bring it back for what we kind of joke is another season of the show.
Sure.
So if you have been watching, if you've watched any of the episodes or all of the episodes, and you have thoughts, what worked, what didn't work, what you want to see more of, or even less of, really any thoughts you have, any kind of critiques, perfectly welcome. You can leave them in a comment in any one of these streams or email me directly if you want to keep it private, mo at wqlz.com. And all of your feedback, very much appreciated. And a lot of people, I don't know how it's been on your end, Angela, but a lot of people have privately thanked us for doing this show.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been sharing it among my networks as well, and everybody says this is a great idea. This is just a great idea to do this. It's reaching a different audience that we typically reach through AFSP because it's, through QLZ. So that's a slightly different audience that I'm usually interacting with. So it's really just kind of, the outreach and the messaging is just kind of getting out there to a broader audience. So yeah, I mean, I would be so happy to continue the series, to continue to find guests that people find interesting and informative. And again, like you were saying, Mo, if there are specific things that you want to hear us talk about, we were just kind of going for some general broad topics around the mental health, issues. But definitely if there are specific things you want to talk about, specific things like depression, bipolar, anything around that, we could probably work on that. Would love to continue if anyone's interested. So
exactly. and we have no problem revisiting topics as well. All of them are available on demand. So if you missed one, we do try to cover as much as we can. With that said, we are adaptable. And this week's show, for the longest time, we had originally planned it to be different ethnicities. It was going to be about LGBTQ and a lot of the challenges that so many of these individuals face. But you actually came across a report recently that you found kind of startling, and we decided we need to narrow this topic.
Right. So, February is Black History Month. And so there's a lot of messaging going out there, a lot of conversations going on, certainly a lot of presentations, a lot of, different types of things going on online. And so that's going on. And then at the same time, the Illinois Department of Public Health recently released some early data showing the effect of, COVID-19 on overall suicide rates. And startlingly, what they showed with their data was that suicide rates have actually dropped for all across the board slightly. They've gone up slightly for certain demographics, younger people, 18 to 24, older people. Of course, we've discussed this on this podcast. Yep. And then they're at the bottom of the report, 30% increase for African-American communities. Yeah. So we decided, we had to be flexible. We had to pivot a little bit. And we decided, instead of using this time to talk about, diverse communities, we were specifically going to talk about the Black community because obviously a 30% increase is huge. And specifically compared to the next demographic, only being a 2 to 3% increase, and that overall you're looking at a decrease. So something is going terribly wrong in the Black community vis-a-vis mental health awareness, resources, suicide risk, suicide prevention, suicide death. So we decided to kind of, bump this up a little bit in the queue and really just hone in on the Black community this week.
And there's a world of reasons why this could be the case, because as we know, there are so many different factors on mental health or in general that it's difficult to deal with. And our guest, hopefully we get her connected here soon.
She's trying. She is trying.
She's trying. She's getting a waiting symbol, apparently, a loading symbol, but she'll really be able to help us dive into it. But this report and these numbers that you looked at, Was there any one direction, like one particular item that pointed towards why this is happening?
I mean, we have known for a while that the Black community is not accessing mental health resources at the same rate level as other communities. Some of this is cultural. If when Tandra joins, she'll probably, I've heard her tell the story about, in the Black community, a lot of times it's, if you express that you're having some mental health issues and that maybe you might, you see somebody to talk about it, it's like, oh, no, just go to church and pray.
Mm-hmm.
And that strong religious connection is a protective factor. I think we talk about that in Talk Saves Lives, and we may have even talked about it on this show. A strong connection to any kind of community, your religious community, whatever, that's a protective factor. But when that community is giving you a different message that is possibly preventing you from getting help, then they kind of butt up against each other. And so I think what's happened is, COVID has just made a lot of these discrepancies even more, apparent. Yes. Yeah. So, right. Exactly. So they're just, if the Black community was already not accessing these resources, maybe they were doing it through like going to school, for example, school resources, a school counselor, a school social worker. Here's Tandra. Then yeah, it can be, I think now COVID has really highlighted a lot of the disparities maybe that have always been there. But now it's like taking the Band-Aid off, right? Like now you can see, and a whole community doesn't have the same access to resources. Like you can, in an accelerated way, we have seen how that has played out for this community. Hi, Tandra. I'm so glad you brought in. Happy Friday.
Yes. Hello. Hi, Mo. Thank you very much.
We started without you. Hope you don't mind. But we have built you up as the all-knowing expert on today's topic. No pressure.
That's my reaction.
No pressure.
No pressure, right? No pressure.
But we did talk about the startling numbers, and we talked about the 30% increase in Black communities. And the question that I'd begun asking of Angela, that she just wrapped up her answer there, is why? Like, what is there one defining trait that's causing this?
The answer to that is no.
Yeah.
It is a very complex. It's very complex. And I heard Angela talking about some of those complexities. And certainly COVID and isolation play a role. But I think what we're seeing also with everything that's been going on in our country for Black America is you're seeing things come to the surface that have always existed. So the question I would ask is, these numbers aren't new. Why haven't we been, as a community, been paying attention to differences in suicide rates among Black youth in particular? Why is it just now that we're noticing? Because those trends have always existed. And it's only until suicide rates for whites have gone down that now we're saying, oh, let's see what's going on with Black people and other people of color. Well, we haven't as a community attended to, marginalized groups in research, in access to care. We've not done that at all. And I heard Angela talking a little bit about that when I joined. So I'm glad that we are having this discussion, but there isn't just one factor or one trait. And it's not just COVID. It's not just because schools are closed. We're talking about long-term historical things. We're honestly talking about racial discrimination. We're talking about healthcare inequities. And, we're also talking about stigma, stigma in the Black community, which all communities have stigma when it comes to mental health and suicide. And we have to have interventions and strategies to address the stigma in communities that are culturally appropriate and take into consideration cultural beliefs and traditions and nuances. And honestly, we need people who look like the people we're trying to help. And that's also with regards to seeking help. to being able to have a therapist or a doctor that looks like you, that you feel comfortable with. You're talking about a legacy of mistrust of the healthcare system. And you see that being manifested with this vaccine. I got my first dose today, but I was like rolling around on the floor and had my teddy bear and thinking that they were injecting something in me. But I have a reason for that. It's not paranoia.
Right.
So we have to highlight these things, not point finger and blame, but have conversations like we're having today to begin to peel back the onion on some of these issues.
Right. I would say that that's true. Yeah. And then just the importance of representation too. I mean, we internally in AFSP have been talking a lot about how our programming is not necessarily culturally as diverse as it could be. And, we're really making a lot of effort to change some of our programming, change some of our messaging, change some of our materials, some of our graphics, some of the presentations, some of the slides, just because just like there isn't a one size fits all for a medical issue, there certainly isn't a one size fits all for a mental health issue. And, health is health. And so just trying to have this one message that comes out of this one sort of cultural lane, and having these blinders on about the way that other people, family structures, who do you talk to? What is the culture about? Who you go to if you have a problem? I know that I was close friends with someone in the Jehovah's Witness community, for example. And, before they go to a mental health professional in that religion, for example, there is a whole structure of counselors that are sort of pastoral counselors in that church, within that organization. And that's who they're going to go to first, and so if we drop in and say, call the crisis text line or it's like, well, no, they have a very specific sort of hierarchy of how they get help. And these people from their church are kind of seen as like the first step because they're closer to, there's just a cultural and religious differences that if you go in there with a AFSP program that doesn't take into account your audience, they may tune out. They may say, oh, sure, but I don't go to a psychiatrist because I have these people at my church, for example, who are counselors. So just really sort of being more aware of the cultural differences, I think, is if you're trying to help someone, if you're trying to have a conversation with someone, is a starting point. Just realizing that there could be you may be talking about the same thing with completely different vocabulary, for example. That's one thing I thought about.
As you were talking, Angela, I was also thinking about when we do Talk Saves Lives or other suicide prevention programs, you see the message is if someone is suffering, if someone is in need, you call 911. Now, I want us to think about that for a moment. So, and you're shaking your head, Mo, because I think you know where I'm going with this. So 911 may be a sign of relief and help for certain groups of people, but for other groups of people, it isn't. And so even just understanding that and acknowledging that, I am not suggesting that if someone is suicidal, that we do not do everything that we can, including calling 911. But let's be thoughtful about making that call and what that could mean for that individual. If that is, a young Black man and you're doing that with, or a young Black girl who you're doing that with. And so oftentimes just understanding that will help that individual who's intervening with them just be a bit more compassionate and a bit more thoughtful in how they're trying to reach out and save that individual's life or get them help. So that's another example of, for us who are advocates in suicide prevention, to look at the message. Angela was talking about some of our programs at AFSP, but look at our messaging, not to change it because we want to save lives ultimately, but having that cultural context and understanding of what this could mean, and maybe inviting other people that are safe and supportive in that community or in that family and explaining what you're going to do. There have been times when I literally had two phones, right? And I'm on the phone with the person in crisis and I'm on the phone with 911. and I'm explaining what's happening, and I get off the phone with 911 and I remain on the phone with the person, and I can hear the sirens coming. And there was one gentleman I was on the phone with that when the first responders came to the door, that he got really anxious and agitated. And I said to him, "You're gonna have to open the door. They know why I've called them. They know you're there. You're going to have to open the door because this is a situation that they're concerned. I'm concerned about your well-being. I will stay on the phone with you." Open the, like really supporting him through that crisis. And he opened the door, and the first responders were amazing, and he got the help that he needed. But those are sometimes the extra steps that might be needed in these types of situations.
Part of our first responder episode that we actually did last week, we kind of got into a little bit of a side note and went off into how helpful it would be to have crisis intervention teams that could ride along with our law enforcement. Certainly for this situation that you're talking about, but a lot of times people who are in a mental health crisis, disproportionately people of color, but other people as well are treated as dangerous or, not really handled in a good way when just a regular law enforcement officer shows up who may not have the training in how to de-escalate somebody who is, and people can be a danger to themselves and others when they're having a severe mental health crisis. That is absolutely the case, and you probably need, both a mental health professional and someone who knows really how to physically, restrain somebody and keep them safe and keep everybody else safe. I mean, it's probably both. I just feel like there's definitely an inequity in how the Black community just expressing any range of emotions tends to tip over into they're dangerous, they're acting erratic, me raising my voice in a tense or crisis situation could very easily elicit a completely different reaction than if Tandra, for example, was in the exact same situation. We get into a car accident. I'm upset. I start yelling. Da 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 da. We could have completely different experiences in that situation when the law enforcement arrived to help us, and that is a stress, right? That's a stress for a person of color. To know that even ordinary interactions that you and I may not have to even think twice about could very easily tip over into something dangerous, deadly. And so that's just an extra mental stress that our Black community is living with. That just even ordinary daily activities can be seen through this lens of like potential trauma. And it's just, I feel like it's just a weight that just leads to, again, we're talking about risk factors, protective factors. I always try to kind of bring things back to those two categories. And I just feel like the risk factors for our Black community right now, unfortunately, are so much greater in so many different ways.
Well, I thank you, Angela, for bringing that up. And as you were talking, you described an incident I had not even a year ago where that was totally the case. That experience that you just described. So you are talking about trauma, and you're talking about also what you're illuminating which is another factor, Mo, you asked about, is the misdiagnosis. So, for, a white child who is irritable and angry, they are more likely to get a diagnosis of depression or anxiety. But if a Black boy with anger and irritability presents, then he's a discipline problem, and they're calling security at school. So there is racism inherent in our health system and in our mental health system that I think contributes to why we're seeing some of these increased rates. And let's not be fooled. Little Black boys and little Black girls know this. They know that they're seen and treated differently. I have 2 Black sons at home. They're 9th grade and they're in 4th grade, and they see it and they feel it. And those experiences that they have are valid. And imagine not having someone who understands and can help you sort through that. and you're seeking help from a counselor and you're told that it's minimized, that trauma is not understood, and it's almost dismissed.
Mm.
And it leaves you feeling like no one listens to me. They don't take me seriously. These things and these experiences that are happening are real. And it just perpetuates the cycle of mistrust. And it also, just feeds that stigma and the reluctance that many people in the Black community have in seeking help for mental health conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine. I really can't imagine. I mean, there's already the stigma of mental health. Is it real? Is it not real? Everybody here on this video, we agree and know that it's real, but there's still unfortunately a large portion of people that think it's just in our heads.
Get over it. Right?
So speaking up about it in general can be difficult for some, but then not knowing if you can truly trust the individual you're opening up to puts even more weight and pressure on, which then, as Tandra just said, just keeps adding to it. And I can't imagine what people go through.
Well, in our Talk Saves Lives presentation, there's a slide where they say, when a person makes an attempt, a suicidal crisis has been reached. And what that means is the stressors that they are experiencing in their brain are not met by any coping strategies. They have exceeded whatever coping strategies are available. And that's why we always say there's no one reason for suicide. There's no one reason, because it's so dynamic, right? Whatever different stressors are going on with you personally, wherever you happen to be in this, personal space that you're in, when you're going to reach that crisis point versus another person never reaching a crisis point. But I just think that what we're talking about here is all of these issues of systemic racism, of racism in mental health, of like sort of inequity in care, misdiagnosis. Again, these are just stressors. And so that coping strategy system may be shorting out more quickly for these communities, because it's just so much coming in all the time, so much stress, so many stressors. It's just like they're coping, their little shield. We all have a shield that we kind of deflect, or we have our coping strategies. But if it's coming from all these different angles, then you do reach that point where that crisis moment happens and you've run out of coping strategies, or you can't keep up with the coping strategies. And so I think that is how, all marginalized communities definitely end up reaching maybe, this mental health state, and that why we see these numbers that we do. But Tandra's right. These are not surprising. Actually, these trends have been going on in suicide prevention and in mental health for a long time. As she said, it's standing out to us so much right now because it dropped for all these other communities and it went up for the Black community. And so we've always seen this trend. We've always known that their rates were higher, right? That the rates were higher for various communities, LGBTQ, for example, trans. But now you see what it's like. It just really highlighted exactly how big the problem is. It's not new. It's just that the way that the data has played out now really shines like that light on it. So,
as you see, a very long thank you from one of our viewers here, but talking about how this is a topic that's not open enough, that it's been here, it's existing, the symptoms go undiagnosed, but at least we can try. We can start that change, and I'll leave it up on the screen a little bit longer because it is a lot to read there. Actually, I think even the program cut her off, unfortunately, but do sincerely thank you for that. Tandra, I want to ask you, you talk about there needs to be more people in the Black community that look like each other to be able to help each other out. Is there a portion of the Black community that does not believe in mental illness?
I would say yes. I think we see, within the Black community, the stigma that the larger society faces. And it exists in the Black community. You hear things like, Black people don't kill themselves. They don't die by suicide. White people do. That's not something we do, right? And so I do think that there is a stigma and it's interesting as I think about it and have these conversations about racism and microaggressions and trauma. When you have a people that have been so traumatized that it just a part of our society. And Angela said, you know, every day, it's everyday assaults. And they don't have to be big things. They're little slights. They're things I experience on the job, things I experience when I walk in the grocery store, when I go to my child's school. And so there's so many different kinds of trauma that we experience that as a people that we've kind of learned to just deal with and accept. And it just is what it is. So now to call it depression or to call it anxiety, but this is what you've seen and how the people have survived.
Interesting.
It gets really deep, you
Right.
know. So when you add the element of religion and faith and the role of the Black church, you see how a people have survived yet not thrived. And so when you hear people say, just pray about it or talk to Jesus about it, that's the coping mechanism that for many Blacks that they've relied on, that we've relied on. But like Angela is saying, it gets to a point where that you can have both, right? You can have Jesus and you can have a counselor. Right?
Right.
And so I think that right now for the Black community, we're at this point where there's this opportunity for us to be able to really reach out and do things better. And it's top down and bottom up. So there's not enough research being done that includes Black people and other people of color. So we actually don't have a lot of data. Research drives, money drives research. Research drives treatment, right? And so we need that. We need to allocate funds for culturally appropriate research. We need to look at how our interventions that we utilize for mental health treatment and suicide, are they utilizing people of color, Black people in the trials when they're looking at effectiveness, what works, what doesn't work. So we need that. But we also, Mo, we also need people in the Black community and in other marginalized communities to want to desire and want to have professions as counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists and physicians. We have to make those opportunities more readily available for people so that they can begin to reach their own community. Angela knows this. A lot of the work that I do on behalf of AFSP, I'm doing in the Black community. I'm not excluding other communities, but I am reaching the Black community because it is needed. I'm not the only one that does that. You know, I'm one of a lot of people that do that, but specifically that is needed to be able to talk about some of the issues surrounding the stigma with someone who understands and has some credibility with the people, because there is great mistrust.
I think that's true. I wonder, Mo, if it would be a good time to show, we talked about the importance of seeking help from someone that looks like you, or someone that, you know, understands your cultural background or shares that. And having said that, you can find these on our resources page for afsp.org/resources. But these are just a list of things. So, for example, I had no idea that there are all these organizations, helplines, initiatives, directories of therapists that are specific to the Black community. And so I think what, you know, maybe if someone is watching this now and they want to take a screenshot of this page and the next one, that would be great. Also know that Mo always posts these, and so you can go back and rewatch this, and you know, and when you're in a spot where you can take a screenshot. You know, these would be good things to have, especially if you want to help somebody, you know, get access to treatment or find treatment. But this is a list right here. I mean, Black Mental Health Alliance, Inclusive Therapists, Black Mental Wellness. These are big resources that I literally had no idea they existed until AFSP gave this resource page to us. And then the next one, unless you want to talk about any of those, Tandra, I don't know.
Sure. Another one
No, I think that those are great resources. And like Angela said, they're on AFSP's page. I'm sure Mo will share them too.
Yep.
I personally used, and provided them to people that I know. Therapy for Black Girls, for example, is great because people want care with a provider that they feel comfortable with, that will understand and support. I mean, think about what therapy is all about, right? Validating, us creating a safe place that is trauma-free, where you don't feel like you're being discriminated against, and you don't experience that power dynamic. And it's so very important to an individual's healing to be able to find a treatment provider that one is comfortable with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, I mean, again, like this was a big eye opener to me. I didn't realize really even how granular some of these sites are. And I want to make sure that people know that they're out there and you can share these with people or use them in your own networks. But yeah, a lot of really good information and resources out there that I think a lot of people are not aware of. But
I think now in general is just a good time to understand one another. I think not just mental health, but that is a theme that Angela and I have had every single week is listening and trying to understand and not judging and being there for people. But I think in general, now's a good time to realize that the Black community has had nonstop issues. It's never gone away. And if we can start building up and just be better to each other, then that's a step in the right direction. And hopefully we can start finally dropping those numbers that have long been ignored.
I think that's absolutely right, Mo.
I agree, Mo, and I appreciate you and your show and your partnership with AFSP for hosting these conversations. And I've been having conversations, really powerful conversations around these issues, especially this year. AFSP has been involved with those conversations. Our Illinois chapter has been involved in having those conversations. And so for that, I am very grateful and thankful that we can come together, listen, understand one another better, and then most importantly, I think, act on what we now know and be better for it. So thank you for your platform and allowing us to do so.
Well, thank you for coming on and helping us open up about this discussion. And I hope that we're able to make at least a little bit of difference, that some people, their eyes are open a little bit more, just thinking a little bit more, whatever it may be. I hope we're able to reach some people with this and all of the episodes. And, we can start all feeling a little bit better about ourselves moving forward.
Absolutely.
Yep, definitely.
So with that said, if you want to leave any comments for us, even though we're wrapping up the show now, but if you want to say something, respond to something that Tandra said, Angela, or myself, you can leave it in the comments. We'll make sure it gets forwarded to all the right people. Mo at WQLZ.com as well. Tandra, again, thank you for your time. And Angela, thank you for your expertise.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. Thanks, Mo.
Yes. Thank you.